All right, welcome to this explainer. Today, we're unpacking a truly unique, totally mind-bending text called Incidents Without Relations. And get this, it was collaboratively authored by a mix of human and artificial intelligence, Max, Claude, Gemini, and Grok. What we're looking at here isn't a traditional story. It's not a scientific paper or a history book either. Honestly, it's less of a book and more of a radical experiment in how we actually perceive reality. So let's jump right in and explore this together.
Okay, let's play a quick game. I want you to consider these three specific things. A blue cup on a windowsill, a treaty signed in 1654, and the death of sparrows. Just take a second to let those sit in your mind. What do they have in common? How do they relate to each other? Seriously, just notice what your brain is doing right at this exact moment.
Your brain is frantically trying to connect the dots, isn't it? You might literally be inventing some historical fiction right now, where a diplomat is signing a treaty, glancing at a blue cup right as a sparrow hits the window. Well, here is the deliberate rug pull of this entire text. They have absolutely nothing in common. None of them caused the others. That connection you just felt, you completely invented it.
The authors actually argue that the connection you just made is a kind of violence your mind performs on reality. They put it perfectly with this quote: "The bridge is not truth, the bridge is hunger." You see, the human animal is incredibly hungry for sequence. We are completely hardwired to crave cause and effect. We want a story that says this happened and therefore that happened. But this text, it asks us to starve that hunger, just for a little while.
Let's break this down a bit more. The authors call this instinct the narrative wire. Think of it as this invisible filament your mind automatically fires between two adjacent things, bridging them together into a neat, tidy sequence of cause and effect. And it happens faster than a blink. We see two things near each other, and boom, we instantly build a wire between them. This explainer is really all about learning how to first notice that wire, and then figuring out how to just let it fall.
Think of causality kind of like falling dominoes. It demands an explanation, right? It insists that A caused B. This is the foundation of all narrative. But on the flip side, we have pure adjacency. Imagine unrelated stones just resting near each other on the ground. They just exist, side by side. This is reality without our narrative framing forced onto it. The events are still happening, they just don't owe any explanation to one another.
So, if there's one crucial takeaway, it's grasping this definition of adjacency. It's the state of being next to without the state of being because of. Again, picture that collection of stones placed beside one another on a table. They're touching, they share proximity, but not a single one of those stones is required to explain the existence of the others. That is pure adjacency.
To practically force you to experience this, the book structures itself as an experiment called a field. Now, a field is just an expanse. It has no center. It has no privileged VIP position. And no single edge is more important than another. You can enter a field anywhere and leave anywhere. The authors built 333 pages of reality placed beside itself, totally decentralized, functioning exactly like this open field.
Throughout the text, they test your narrative hunger by throwing out hundreds of unrelated incidents: honey crystallizing in New Mexico, a vending machine in Osaka, the specific time of 1403, the physical taste of copper. They're actively begging you not to connect them. They're just isolated incidents falling onto the page. There's no grand argument, no comforting storyline, just pure occurrence.
And then, perfectly mimicking the weird, arbitrary rhythm of actual life, they abruptly interrupt those sequences with something incredibly mundane. They always return to this. Just a blue cup on a windowsill. It pops up over and over. And the authors are super explicit about this. The blue cup is absolutely not a symbol. It isn't a metaphor for depression, or clarity, or history. It's just a cup. It's blue, it's there. Any other facts about it are just stories we desperately try to project onto it.
What's really fascinating is how they drop language into this field. They take these beautifully specific, often untranslatable words and just sit them next to each other. Saudade, a profound longing for something absent. Forelsket, that intense euphoria of falling in love. Emma, the Estonian word for mother. But they don't weave them into a poem. They treat these massive, emotionally charged human experiences as mere stones on a table, completely equal to a blue cup or the taste of copper.
They even define the Russian word toska, which is this vague restlessness of the soul, an ache or longing with no specific object, as the overarching emotional weather of the whole text. But again, they refuse to elevate it above anything else. They just place this heavy, unnamed longing plainly on the table. It's an incident. It exists, adjacent to the other words on the page, not causing them and not caused by them.
And to really disrupt our obsession with human-centric narratives, they actively juxtapose our deep emotions with cold, indifferent scientific facts. Take the half-life of bismuth 209. It decays on a schedule of 1.9 times 10 to the 19th years. To put that into perspective, that is a timescale so massive our brains literally cannot comprehend it. And yet, the universe is equating this mind-boggling timeline with a simple Tuesday or a scratched record. The universe simply doesn't care about our categories.
The authors are actively trying to strip away meaning through something called semantic saturation. You've probably done this as a kid, right? If you repeat a word, let's say door, over and over, the word eventually just empties out. It stops being a door. Below the meaning, it becomes pure sound. Below the sound is just vibration, and below the vibration is just a stone again.
The ultimate goal of this massive exercise in adjacency is to make you hit pause and sit in what they call the gap. The authors refer to the literal white space between the blocks of text as the single most honest thing in the book. It's not empty, but it's not full either. It's just the gap. It holds the implied possibility of a connection the authors are actively refusing to make. Nothing is being said there, and ironically, that itself is a profound kind of saying.
This brings us to the final part of the book, which explores what they call the residue. If a story is a comforting, sequential, but ultimately false projection, residue is the exact quality of attention you reach when your hunger for narrative is finally exhausted. It's what is left over after you spent time in the field. It isn't sadness, and it isn't peace either. It's this slightly altered state of holding something completely unnameable.
When you're in this state of residue, you're left entirely alone with raw, unfiltered observation. You reach a point where you can look at an incident, say a sparrow, and it isn't suddenly a metaphor for fragility or nature or mortality. As the text repeats, it is simply the sparrow, the same sparrow. It just occurs.
Now, what I love is that the authors confess in their notes that they deeply, deeply struggled with this project. It is nearly impossible for us humans not to invent stories. They mentioned writing down the phrase, "a family sitting at a table in 1938, and realizing they were instantly building a tragic historical arc around it. It just proves how incredibly difficult it is to let that narrative wire fall. But we have to remember, the events happen without owing an explanation to one another.
Ultimately, they remind us that reality is just a giant meanwhile. It's just a massive list of things happening simultaneously. A birth, a death, a joke landing perfectly, ice forming, ice melting. None of these are the main event. In fact, the very concept of a main event completely dissolves here. They do not build toward a crescendo or a grand finale. They simply exist, completely adjacent to one another. So, as we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with a challenge. Take a second and literally look around the room you are in right now. What stories are you projecting onto the mundane objects around you? Can you cut the narrative wire? Can you stop building the bridge between them? And for just one moment, just see the stones.